Hey folks, how are you? I'm the late Joe Biden. I apologize for being late. Dahlia, thank you for that introduction. I apologize for being late. It wasn't me, believe it or not. I'm lots of times late, but the plane was 2.5 hours late. And I am underdressed because I asked the host whether or not I should take 15 minutes to run upstairs and change in a tuxedo and keep you waiting or get here. And they said, you better get here quick, everybody's going to leave. So I did bring a tuxedo, I promise you. Folks, I want to say to Dahlia, you and your peers, you're the future of LULAC. As a matter of fact, you're more than that. And I mean this sincerely. You're the future of the country. And seeing all the young folks, we're in good hands. I want to thank you, all the members of LULAC, for having me here tonight. It's great to be among friends. I came today for several reasons. The first and foremost reason I came is to thank you. Thank you for your leadership as a rational national voice on matters relating to the Latino community. LULAC has been around for 89 years. Well, I hadn't been around that long, although some accuse me of being there that long. My first LULAC convention I spoke at was 1973. I was a 29-year-old senator. And I had the pleasure of being a friend of LULAC for a long, long time. And together, with your leadership, we won a lot of tough battles together over that time. In '74, we worked together to improve the treatment of migrant workers by amending the Fair Labor Contract Registration Act. I almost lost my first election because in Delaware, I worked with Cesar Chavez because we had an awful lot of migrant workers, and they lived in horrible conditions. And I was for, at that time, more open immigration, and it was not a very popular thing at the time. It's changed a lot, though, in my state. My state now has about 18% of the state is Hispanic, is Latino. And so, folks, the next year, we expanded the Voting Rights Act to prevent states from using English-only ballots. In '94, we put the problem of domestic violence front and center, and we passed the Violence Against Women Act. And when Barack and I came to the White House, we fought side by side with you to confirm the first Latina justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And has she done a heck of a job. And I'd like to go back a long way before that, though, all the way back to LULAC's roots. You know, as bad as things are now, we have been there before. I'm reading now John Meacham's book on liberty in America, and he talks about the revival of the Ku Klux Klan in 1922. He talks about the bitter anti-immigration fights and wars that went on then. The first decades of the 20th century were marked by deportation raids, mob violence, and exploitation and scapegoating of immigrant workers. Many of your parents and grandparents were consigned to second-class neighborhoods, segregated to inferior schools, and barred from entering white establishments across the Southwest. LULAC was born in response to those efforts, those affronts to human dignity. And you stood up for the dignity of every step of the way since. Perhaps no story captures that spirit, your impact, more clearly than the story of Felix Longoria. The fact of the matter is, maybe some of you don't even know, some of you younger folks, Felix was a Mexican-American soldier from South Texas who volunteered to fight for his country. He was 25 years old when he gave his life in World War II. But when his remains were brought home to Texas, he was denied a place of rest in his hometown cemetery simply because of his heritage. And LULAC wouldn't stand for it. The organization stood up and spoke out to assert his dignity. Because of that effort, Felix now rests in a place of honor and respect he deserves in Arlington National Cemetery. Folks, I know this is old history, but it's important. My dad used to have an expression and beat it into our heads constantly, me and my 3 siblings. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. And to me, that's what LULAC's been about. The sort of leadership that's helped the Latino community make remarkable progress through the years, and especially proud of the progress we won together during the Obama-Biden administration. Latino unemployment dropped from a peak of 13% to 5.9% on the day we left office. Still not the financial remuneration deserved, but improvement. The uninsured rate of Latino Americans dropped nearly 20 points. The high school dropout rate for young Latinos fell by 40% between 2011 and 2016. I know it can be hard to stay focused on the progress given everything that's happened since we left office. And because you asked me to speak for only 10 minutes, which I probably won't be able to do, but I'll try, I'll be as blunt as I can. I know that shocks you that I'd be blunt and straightforward. And this is not hyperbole, your work, now listen to me, your work today is more relevant and consequential than it has ever been. And that is a fact. That's due in no small part to the current administration, which is attempting to tear down everything you and I believe in. As I said, I was raised by a man who understood that a job was about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It was about your place in the community. It's about respect. And he'd say, Joey, it's about being able to look your child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. My father believed with every fiber in his being that everyone deserved a fighting chance, that ordinary people like him and me can do extraordinary things given a half a chance. Just give us a chance. That's all we ask for. And that starts with an immigration policy that strikes at the heart of the dignity of us as a nation. I know your interest goes far beyond immigration, but I also know that it's an issue on all of our minds right now. Grotesque lies about immigrants, about crime, about cost to the community. They're simply lies, factually inaccurate. And look, folks, this administration's policy that literally ripped babies from the arms of their mothers and fathers is one of the darkest moments in our history. I do a lot of foreign policy. I still go around the world. I was in Europe, in Copenhagen. I was recently down in Bogota, Colombia, 4 days ago. Our reputation is being tarnished around the world. Not only is it a national shame, it tarnishes the very idea of America and diminishes our standing in the world. But this administration's assault on our dignity runs even deeper than that. It doesn't just reveal itself in the betrayal of the Dreamers or pardoning of a sheriff who's terrorized the community. It is also in the underfunding of our schools, and attacks on labor, on the ability of workers to bargain for their own worth. Do you realize there's millions of people in America making an hourly wage, a sub-wage that you can't live on, that in fact have to sign non-compete agreements? It's not just organized labor, but you can't go from one sandwich shop to another. They sign non-compete agreements, millions of people. Why? For no other reason than to eliminate your ability to bargain for your own worth. And look at the neglect of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. My wife heads up the U.S. version of the U.S. Save the Children program. She went to thank all of the people of the Save staff who were there during the hurricane. It's horrible. Thousands of people died. We're in a situation where we were told everything was basically all right. You know why it happened. I don't believe these guys in the administration actually think Puerto Ricans are Americans. They're American citizens already. Look what happened in Houston and everywhere else. Where many children, American children, lost a year of school due to this devastation. A year of their education gone with a gust of wind and no concern by this administration. We're in the midst of an all-out assault on human dignity. Yes, at the border, but also in the courtroom, in the classroom, and on the factory floor. Every one of these fights needs to be fought and won. But more than anything else, our future rests on one thing in particular, and that's whether or not Latino Americans are dealt into the economy in a way that gives them an equal chance to succeed. It's that basic. Just an even shot. Just give them a shot. Give you a shot. They can do the rest. If you believe in the basic bargain upon which this country was founded, that all you really need is an opportunity, an even chance to claim your place in the middle class. With all due respect, LULAC's job is to protect the promise, and preserve that chance. Not only for the good of the Latino community, but for the good of America, for all of us. And by the way, it is not hyperbole for me to say, literally America's future depends on it. Our future, my grandchildren, my Irish Catholic grandkids, their future depends on whether or not that opportunity is given. And that means that tomorrow, within the next 12 years, the population of Latino Americans in our workforce is projected to grow by another 5%. 25% of all the children now in school, grade school, are Latino. Ladies and gentlemen, this is profound, and it cannot be ignored. The fact of the matter is that imagine what happens when a full quarter of children in America are Latino. If they are ignored, if they are not nurtured, if they end up without the capacity because of lack of education, fair housing, discriminatory laws, what does that say about our future as a nation? What does it say? How could we take a quarter of the population in our schools today and say, you don't deserve an even chance? How can America, literally, how can America succeed? Our success, in large part, depends on the success of the Latino community. How can an economy prosper if these children are not treated with dignity, given an opportunity to realize their God-given potential? It also tells us that at the time when 6 in 10 jobs are going to require more than a high school diploma by the end of this decade, one of the keys to success is access to decent, affordable education. There isn't a single profession or industry in our country that would not be made stronger if young Latino Americans had equal shot to pursue and available of a good education. We need to open the doors to the next generation of Latino doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, elected officials. That's why we need to put higher education within the reach of all of our children. Remember, 6 out of 10 jobs now require more than a high school degree, at least a certificate, community college or four-year college. You know, the content of your mind and not the income of your family should determine your access to education. We could put every single, listen to me now, this is not for applause, I'm deadly earnest about this. We can put every single qualified student in America in a community college right now for free, right now, increasing the number of people in community college from 6 to 9 million people, increasing, no, don't clap, I want you to hear this, it's really important, increasing the growth in our GDP by 0.2% per year. Over 10 years, it's over $1 trillion. Talk about productivity. But there goes that big spending Biden again. It costs $6 billion a year to do that. How can we afford it? Well, let me tell you something. We have written into the tax laws $1.3 trillion worth of loopholes, mainly for corporations and high-income individuals. If you eliminated just one, called stepped-up basis, I didn't know what it was because all my years in the Senate, I was listed as the poorest man in Congress. Not a joke. And when I did my financial disclosures as vice president, as my wife, the professor, will say, you can Google it, front page of the Washington Post, top of the column said, quote, "It's probable no man has ever assumed the office of vice president with fewer assets than Joe Biden." Because I agreed I would never take an honorarium, I would never be engaged in a business enterprise, and I would never own any stock or any bond because I wanted to be totally independent. So when I left the Senate and the vice president, no, it's not. It was just for my independence. And when I left, my net worth is between $55,000 and $155,000 after 44 years. But look, here's the deal, guys. The deal is I didn't know this thing called stepped-up basis. I didn't know what it was. Hope some of you do know what it is. I didn't. What it means is that if you go out and make an investment and you have a capital gain, say, of $1 million or $100,000, whatever, and you're on your way to sell it or trade it in to get your money, pay your taxes, you pay at a rate of capital gains, not what your income is. But if on the way, God forbid, you're hit by a truck and you die and it's left to your daughter or your son, they pay no tax. No evidence that that additional $17 billion in any way increased productivity or them. They're already doing very well. It's no punishment. It was a tax owed 5 minutes earlier. It's not inheritance tax. And if you did that, you'd free up $17 billion out of $1.3 trillion. We could put every single solitary kid in school who qualifies, cutting college in half, the cost of college, and still have $11 billion to reduce the deficit. But folks, think about it. Think about what it would do for our country and this community if we would multiply the possibilities for the next generation of Latin Americans and many others, deserving young people of all colors and stripes. A few years ago, just before he died, I had the opportunity to sit down with a former president of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, referred to as the Henry Kissinger of Asia, because of brilliant. He wrote extensively on the future of India, Russia, China, and America. And he was 92 years old, and I was in India, in Mumbai, for the administration, which is the industrial center of India. I was on my way to Tokyo and then to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping. I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader. I've spent over 25 hours of private dinners with him, just he and I and an interpreter. And so I got a call from Lee Kuan Yew, who was 92. This is the time, remember that aircraft went down in the Indian Ocean and they could find the black box that kept trying, the same period. And he wanted to talk to me because he wanted to know what I thought of Xi Jinping, because he had consolidated power in China faster than anyone had ever done before. And so I agreed to meet with him on the way. And they said he's very sick, so just spend a little time with him. He'll want to spend more time. And he spoke perfect English. And he sat there, and about 15 minutes into the conversation, I was being self-conscious about how much time I was taking of his because of his health. And I looked at him and I said, Mr. President, what is China doing now? And he looked at me, he said, China, this is literal. He said, China is in America looking for the buried black box. And I wondered what in the hell he was talking about. Like you're wondering what it means. He said, they're looking for the box that contains the secret that allows America to be the only country in history to constantly be able to remake itself. I looked at him and I said, Mr. President, I've been around long enough to hazard a guess for you where they find that box. They'll find it contains two things. One, it contains evidence that in America, we do not worship at the shrine of orthodoxy. No child ever gets in trouble in America for challenging orthodoxy. And that's why we're able to break old things and make so many new things. So, but there's a second reason. It's our secret. From the late 1700s on, we've had constant waves of immigration. Constant waves. Met by xenophobia that lasts for anywhere from a year to 6 or 8 years. Always overcome. And he looked at me and said, why is that important? I said, because we in America have been able to cherry pick the best of every single culture in the world. And he still looked at me like, what was I talking about? I said, think about it, Mr. President. It takes an enormous amount of courage, optimism, a sense of perseverance, and an absolute determination to leave everything you know, everything you're comfortable with, and leave and go to a country that you're not sure even wants you. My great-great-grandfather got in a coffin ship in 1848 in the Irish Sea, leaving everything he knew. People think that somebody right now in Guadalajara is sitting around a hand-hewn kitchen table with his family and saying, I got a great idea. Let's sell everything we have, leave everybody we know, give the money to a coyote, have him take us across the border, leave us in the desert, in a country that doesn't want us, where we don't speak the language. Won't that be fun? Seriously, guys, think about who we are. Don't underestimate yourself. The reason we are who we are is every single culture has sent us their best. People with determination, conviction, and an absolute determination to succeed for them and their children. That's why America is America. Period. That spirit has been infused in our DNA for more than 2 centuries. It's the spirit of our mothers and fathers, our grandparents, ourselves, whomever it is that made the choice to come here in the first place. And that spirit runs through the children and grandchildren of immigrants on down the line. And it lives in all of us whose families made it here. My favorite contemporary poet, my colleagues in the Senate and the White House always thought I quoted Irish poets all the time because I'm Irish. That's not the reason. No offense to Spanish poets, but the Irish poets are the best poets in the world. My favorite contemporary poet, who died recently, wrote a poem called The Cure at Troy. And there's a line in that poem, a paragraph, I think defines where America is today better than it did his Ireland that he was talking about. And it goes like this. It says, history tells us not to hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, that longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history rhyme. However daunting the history, however stern the challenge, we still hold the power, and I believe this with every fiber in my being, to make hope and history rhyme. We know that we can succeed if our kids have access to quality education, if our families have access to affordable health care, if every single one of us has access to opportunity. It's the American story. That's why I created the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware, to keep working on these issues. We know we need to get there, but first and foremost, we need to vote. Well, the last election, the Latino turnout rate was 47%. The national turnout rate was 61%. If the Latino community voted the same as the national vote, there would have been another 14 million Latino votes who stayed home. 14 million. In an election that came down to 72,000 votes in a few states. Think about the incredible power this community holds in its hands. This is not hyperbole. Think about it. Think about it. I know I'm told, particularly by younger people and the millennials, who are the most tolerant, the most open, the best educated generation in American history. Except one thing, they don't want to be involved in politics. But they have to remember their power, the power of the vote. Raise your voices. Run for office. You know, when I was a kid, and I decided to get involved, my generation in the 60s, late 60s, up until the year I graduated, the mantra of my generation, because of the war in Vietnam, the civil rights movement not coming to fruition, women still being widely discriminated against, my generation, it was drop out, head to Haight-Ashbury. Not a joke. Go back and look at the history. But the year I graduated, that's from law school, that year, the only two heroes ever had, other than my father, were assassinated. Dr. King was assassinated. My hometown was in flames, occupied by the National Guard. For 10 months, the only city since Reconstruction, only state occupied by the military. And the day I walked across the stage to read my diploma, Robert Kennedy, who's my hero, was assassinated after becoming the de facto nominee of the Democratic Party. And turns out I wasn't the only one, was absolutely determined that, damn it, I was going to be part of changing things. I come from a modest background. I'm the first, not a joke, United States Senator I ever knew. We didn't know anybody who was a banker or a lawyer or a doctor. Well, we knew the family doctor. We didn't know anybody who was a corporate leader. We lived in a safe neighborhood, a 3-bedroom home with 4 kids and a grandpop and my mom and dad. It was safe. We had no influence. But I was determined, damn it. 4 years later, 5 years later, I sat across from President Ford in the Oval Office after Nixon left, demanding to know when we end the war in Vietnam. And 5 weeks after that, there was a helicopter lifting the last person off the roof of Vietnam. But in the meantime, between the time I graduated and that happened, 17,000 of my generation were killed. We got fed up and we changed it. Folks, I think this younger generation has finally had enough. I'm convinced, with your pushing and prodding and helping, I'm convinced they're ready to fight to preserve the promise of an inclusive middle class, to take on the battles new and old, advance civil rights, as we remember our leaders that brought families together. Let's not forget this family belongs together. All of us. America has always been better when we've acted as one America. We've overcome every single problem we've ever had when we act as one America, and we've been through much tougher times. One America, united in belief that in America we can do anything. I was raised by a middle class, I guess technically lower middle class family who believed I could be anything. I could do anything. That's why for so many generations we were viewed as the ugly Americans, because we thought we could do anything. I remain optimistic as ever that we can work together to bring America back. I could not be more proud to stand with you in the battles ahead. It's time for us to stand up, for God's sake. Hold our heads high and remember who the hell we are. This is America, and we can do anything, and we need you badly to get in the fight and stay in the fight and bring us back. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.